Hey guys, Mr. Happy here, and in this video I want to cover a topic a lot of players have been speculating about for some time. For those who don't know, Black Mage will be seeing some gameplay adjustments in patch 2.3. Now there have been multiple mentions of the changes coming to Black Mage and ideas that people think that might be coming, but Yoshi P in the live letter 14 stated that they would be, quote, making overall adjustments to balance in relation to other jobs, unquote. Yoshi P also mentioned that they would be improving single target DPS, but since they are so good at doing AoE damage, that simply buffing single target DPS would make them too strong. With this in mind, I'd like to share some of my thoughts on things I'd like to see change or even expect them to change based on the above statements. Now let me start off the bat by saying I'm not exactly a Black Mage guru. Having said that, I think anyone can go hit a training dummy for a few minutes and find that there's just some things about the job that are troublesome and clunky. These are the kind of things I want to see change as opposed to just flat buffs to their damage. First off, unfortunately, based on that AoE comment above, I feel safe to say they're probably going to be trying to put an end to that whole getting an MP tick after casting flare thing that I did in my AoE rotation video I put out yesterday. There may even be some other AoE adjustments we don't know about yet, but they've already tried to get rid of that once and they didn't exactly succeed, so I'm expecting for them to try and put the nail in the coffin on that one in patch 2.3. As for single target damage, the first thing that bothers me when I'm playing a Black Mage is the number of wasted Firestarter procs that I get. For those of you wondering what I mean by a wasted proc, there are basically times when you'll get a Firestarter proc after you finish casting fire, but you won't actually see it until you're in the middle of casting your next fire. This is caused by the animation delay of how long it takes for the fire to travel to the target location and deal its damage. What ends up happening is that after you finish casting a fire while you have a proc, you'll get another proc before you can expend the first one. Some might say, why not just interrupt your fire cast to use the Firestarter proc? Well, it's actually a substantial damage loss over the course of a fight to do that every single time you get a Firestarter proc. So in order to fix this, I would like to see Firestarter stacks. If Firestarter had a stacking element, even if it just stacked up to 2, you would never have a wasted proc. It would also allow for Black Mages to have stacks stored away for when they know a mechanic might be coming and they're going to be running around, so they could pop off multiple Fire 3s while on the move, thus improving their mobility, their burst, and their sustained damage. Now another way to approach the Firestarter problem is to give Fire a shorter cast time than the global cooldown. This would allow one to see the proc before their global cooldown comes up again and use it accordingly. The downtime within the global cooldown could also give Black Mages the time to move between casts a bit more consistently. For this to be considered a reasonable amount of time, the cast would likely have to be as much as 1 second less than the global cooldown, meaning that if your global cooldown was 2 seconds, Fire would have to have a 1 second cast time. That's of course based on the way it is currently. If Firestarter procs were to appear a little bit quicker, that of course could be adjusted as well. Personally, I like the Firestarter proc idea more, as it just cleans up the current playstyle a bit, though I do have to admit even that method seems like more of a band-aid to the issue of timing with receiving the proc. It does have its benefits, but it's still a result of an ongoing problem with receiving the proc on time. Now this next thing that I'm going to bring up is one that my viewers and I all pretty much agreed with, and we'd like to see Black Mages gain a trait that causes their surecast to allow for casting while moving. This, of course, addresses part of the mobility issue that they have. Now, the only problem with this, and it's not really a problem, but it's just another clunky aspect of the spell, is that Black Mages would have to remember that they have to move in such a way that the enemy is still in front of them within that 90-degree casting cone that everybody has. Otherwise, they wouldn't even be able to cast a spell anyway. So while it does add a degree of skill, it also adds quite a bit of frustration in its own regard. Speaking of surecast, that's another big problem I have with Black Mage compared to other DPS jobs in the game, is that most of their abilities are useless most of the time. Sure, they all have their little times where, oh, this skill is useful now and this skill is useful here and there, but they really only have, for example, 1 damage increase in cooldown, which is Raging Strikes, which doesn't even come from their built-in job abilities. That comes from their subclass Archer. Sure, Convert technically is a DPS increase. It gives you that, what, 1 flare every 3 minutes, and Swiftcast is usually used to, what, cast that flare that I just mentioned, but let's look at their other abilities real quick. Let's just run down the list. Mana Wall, Mana Ward, Lethargy, Blizzard 1, Blizzard 2, Freeze, Surecast, Sleep, Apocatastasis, Scathe. I could put Ethereal Manipulation on the list, but I know a lot of Black Mages that actually use that regularly, but most of those skills barely see any usage. Some people filter in an extra Scathe or Blizzard 1 during their Umbral Ice rotation, but that's really about it. Even the use of your thunder spells just seems mismatched to me, or just odd, considering that at most you use 2/3 of them on any given fight, with one of them just being in case you mess up. My example being, usually start with a Thunder 3, you'll do your Thunder 2s in between during your Umbral Ice rotations, and then if you don't have the MP, you can also go with Thunder 1 as a backup spell. But I think it's the only dot in the game that pretty much just gets ignored once you get its subsequent, improvement. It's not like Bio and Bio 2, both of those still get used because they count as two separate dots. Just seems strange to me that as you level up on your Black Mage, you get more and more skills that you barely seem to use. And I'm not saying that they need to make Black Mages more complex or complicated. The easy to learn, tough to master aspect of the Black Mage is actually part of its charm, on top of just seeing really big damage numbers. I just feel that Yoshi P's statement that, quote, Black Mage is meant purely for DPS, unquote, is hard to believe when over half of its skills are all about crowd control and defensive cooldowns as opposed to pure DPS, especially considering how rare that crowd control is actually needed. Perhaps we need a better design where crowd control is more important, not just maybe one lethargy on a Dread Knight in turn 5, or a sleep on the Ochu in Brayflock's hard mode before the gate so it doesn't follow you to the boss. But even then, calling them pure DPS when they're really more of a crowd controlling expert with some damage just seems a bit wrong. Okay, right, so I was supposed to talk about an adjustment regarding all of that, what they could do to change it, make it better, make it more fluid, and to be honest, I can't think of one. Sure, they could just add more effects to some of those spells to give them more than one time that you can use them, but I really feel like that would give them reason to not improve other aspects of the job, such as the Firestarter problem. It's not fair to really take those tools away from Black Mage at all in favor of more damage. I just feel that the game design needs to call for situations where that kind of control is more meaningful. I mean, the best we're going to get, I guess, so far is Ramuh is going to give us another reason to use a Pocket to Stasis, where pretty much only Ifrit called for it before, if ever. Alright, so I guess I just have one last thing, and this is more of a recommendation. This is just something that I thought of that bothered me, and I think it would be pretty cool to add to Black Mage. It's always bothered me that Thunder spells have the Thundercloud proc, Fire spells have the Firestarter proc, but none of the Black Mage's Ice spells seem to have any procs. So, I don't know, that always just bothered me that the Ice spell is completely left out. I understand Blizzard 1 and Blizzard 2 are crowd control. Freeze is a crowd control spell. And Blizzard 3 is really just for the Umbral Ice rotation, but I didn't feel like that was a good enough reason to exclude them from getting procs. So, to follow Black Mage's pattern of relying entirely on procs, and to improve their sustained damage a little bit, I'd like to see Blizzard 3 have a chance at triggering some kind of proc. I mean, the only thing I could really come up with here was my idea for a buff called Frostburn, where all of your MP would be restored instantly when going into Umbral Ice 3 when you cast Blizzard 3, and your next Fire 3 would deal damage equivalent to Astral Fire 3. I mean, I feel like this emphasizes Umbral Ice's point of being there to regenerate your MP, and occasionally giving it to you instantly can open up other play options for Black Mages. On top of that, occasionally making that Fire 3 when switching back to Astral Fire could definitely improve sustained damage, since they wouldn't be facing that point of weakness that they sort of get to when they're doing their Umbral Ice rotation. On top of that, it could be combined with Firestarter procs to kind of take Transpose out of the equation whenever you get a Transpose Firestarter proc when you're switching back. I don't know, I feel like it just adds another element, and it's a little bit more cohesion with the job, if you ask me. So that's really all I have in terms of things I'd like to see Black Mage get in the immediate future. I mean, I have ideas that I would love to see in an expansion for Black Mage, such as the inclusion of the spell they had back in 1.0 called Burst, which was just sort of like their ultimate Thunder spell. And on top of that, I'd also like to see Mana Font sometime soon. That would be a great DPS increase for Black Mage. Think about it. 10 seconds of no MP cost. Think about how many fires and Firestarter procs you could get off in that time. Hell, it may even be more worth it to just spam fire and save up those Firestarter stacks that I was talking about before. Overall, there are some things I'd like to see in the future, but in 2.3, these are the changes I'd like to see. Let me know what you'd like to see change with Black Mage in the comments below. And keep in mind, we're not trying to rework the job from the ground up. We're not trying to add elemental resistances. That doesn't really work in this game. We're just trying to take what's there now and adjust it so they get the increased single target DPS, and the job is a little bit more fun and exciting and doesn't feel as clunky. But also, be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and until next time, take care.